Hello and welcome back to the Wargamer and another painting tutorial. This time I'll be showing you how to paint the British Fair Mile from Warlord Games' Cruel Seas. For this tutorial I'll be using the Army Painter range of paint. Start off painting your ship by applying a primer. This will give us a better surface to paint from by allowing the later layers of paint to adhere to the surface of the ship. We would recommend a spray primer, particularly the Army Painter's Uniform Grey Primer. This paint is a great starting colour as we can easily cover it with other mid-tone paints. The Fair Mile's hull is a slightly lighter grey than the uniform grey base coat, so we'll need to paint over it using stone Golem. In addition to the ship's hull, we'll also tackle all of the various details on the ship's deck, including the bollards, depth charges, torpedo tubes, air intakes, containers, gun emplacements, lifeboat, and also the bridge itself. When you apply a base coat, mix in a little water to thin down the paint, then apply it to the surface of the ship and allow it to dry before applying a second layer over the top. This layering technique will ensure you get a smooth and even coverage of paint. To create the blue colouring of the Fair Mile's deck, we'll be using Wolf Grey. In addition to painting the whole of the ship's deck, we'll also want to paint the tops of some of the details that we painted in the previous step. This is to recreate the blue camouflage that the ship had when viewed from the sky. To paint the two wooden platforms that sit above the two forward torpedo tubes, we'll be using a base coat of Desert Yellow. With the main base coat completed, we can now start to add details to our Fair Mile. The first of these will be the AA guns and depth charges, and for this we'll be using Dungeon Grey. For the navy blue uniforms of the crew, we'll be using a base coat of Dark Sky to paint them. For the life jackets that the crew are wearing, we'll be using Skeleton Bone. Again, use a small brush and take your time with this step. The faces and hands of the crew members are very small, so it's not necessary to paint them. However, if you're feeling brave and have a thin brush, you can base coat these small areas using Kobold Skin. The final area of our crew to paint are their tin helmets, and to paint these areas, we'll be using Dungeon Grey. With all of our base coats completed, we can now begin applying some washes to the miniature. The first wash we'll be using is Dark Tone, however we won't be applying it straight from the pot as it will be much too strong. Instead we want to create a mixture of 1 part Quickshade mixing medium and 1 part Dark Tone. This will reduce the strength of the wash, creating a more subtle shading effect. With your wash mixed, you can now apply it across any grey areas of the miniature. These areas include the hull, depth charges, mines, crew uniforms and lifeboats. The wash should gather in the recesses, creating the effect of shadows, which will help to improve the level of detail. After allowing the dark tone wash to dry, we can now apply a wash of strong tone over the remaining parts of the ship. These areas include the wooden platforms and the crew's skin. Following the same steps as with our previous wash, and remember to mix in the Quickshade mixing medium again. And here we have the completed Fair Mile. You may have noticed a few extra details such as the markings, paint chips and rust, which I applied using the same steps detailed in my Cruel Seas extra details video. Whilst I focused on the Fair Mile for this video, you could easily apply the same techniques to other ships in the British fleet. You can find a full list of all the paints that I've used in this tutorial in the description below, along with any other equipment I've used to create this video, such as my everlasting wet palette. If you enjoyed this video, do let me know in the comments below, and if you haven't done so already, be sure to check out my Patreon page if you would like to support me in making these videos. If you have any questions or would just like to chat with others who enjoy my channel, I've set up a Discord server which you can find a link to in the description below. And so the only thing left to say is, thanks for watching and goodbye.